We will see. Look, folks, I'm going to get back to this Bannon business because there's a lot to this. Well, I say there's a lot to this. A lot of questions I have about this. Because it's what's not being leaked and about who it's not being leaked. That is arousing my curiosity. But let's start on the phones in the Bronx. It's Pedro. Pedro, great to have you up first today on the EIB Network. Hello.
Yes, Rush, I'm just curious. Why should we give Trump so much leeway on flip-flops and changing his mind on so many issues when we don't afford the same to other Republicans?
Well, you don't have to. You don't want to. You don't have to give him any leeway. You are.
Oh, we are. We're letting him. We're letting him get away with stuff. Look, the West Wing is full of Democrats. You predicted it about 2 or 3 weeks ago when they wrote a piece about Bannon being in charge. You said this is to mess with Trump's mind.
This guy's got a very good. I know exactly what he's talking about. Tell me if this is right, Pedro. I was talking about a Washington Post piece. It was a Sunday story, big long story that talked about the rivalry in the White House between the Bannon wing and the Democrat wing in there, the Jared Kushner and Gary Cohn wing. And at that point, the Bannon wing was prevailing. They were winning all the arguments and they were winning all the debates for Trump's favor. But the point was that there were a lot and are a lot of Democrats in the Trump inner circle, and that they do not believe very much of what Trump said on the campaign trail, and they are trying. This is what you're referring to, right?
Well, no, it was something about Saturday Night Live and the Time magazine when they're saying that Bannon is the president, and you said this is to make Trump to play mind games with Trump.
Okay. That's true, too. The Time magazine, a cover story on the second most powerful man, the shadow president, and Saturday Night Live doing the same thing. And I said, what they're trying to do here, is tick off Trump. They're trying to get to Trump's ego. They're trying to tell Trump. They're trying to upset him, make everybody think that Bannon's really running the show. And so now Trump's out there telling Michael Goodwin of the New York Post, I don't need a strategist. I'm my own strategist. I didn't know Steve. I don't know Steve very well. I like Steve's a good guy. But I told him, you guys fix it or I will. This is part of what I want to get into here, but I don't have time right now. It's great to have you back, and they're waiting on the press briefing, the White House press briefing soon underway. The media they're getting to the point now where they can't keep up. And I'll tell you, I saw a piece in the Wall Street Journal today by Daniel Henniger, and I want to read just one thing to you from it, which will give you a perspective of some in the Republican establishment about the Trump presidency. In the past few weeks, writes Mr. Henniger, the Gorsuch appointment, the Syrian strike, the meeting with China's Xi Jinping, we are finally seeing the beginning of the real Trump presidency. The real Trump presidency. Yes, you see, now Trump's turning into what they think a real president does. All this immigration stuff, screw that. All of this trade, screw that. But now we can finally embrace the guy because he's meeting with the Chi-Coms, he's bombing Syria, and he put a good conservative on the bench. Even though the Gorsuch appointment happened long ago, his confirmation was, of course, last week. But anyway, this takes me to my discussion here on the news about Steve Bannon. Have you ever seen, folks, as much coverage, commentary, newspapers, cable news networks, late-night programs? Have you ever seen as much attention paid to a presidential advisor? You haven't. You have not. Interestingly, I think somebody maybe second or third place. You know, when Kissinger was Secretary of State, and I was going to say Zbigniew Brzezinski who was the first guy Jimmy Carter met with every morning. Brzezinski met with David Rockefeller, and then he went over to the White House to tell Carter what Rockefeller said every morning. I'm sorry, folks. The Rockefeller part didn't happen except in the conspiracy books. Excuse me. But Brzezinski, who is the father by way of Mika Brzezinski on MSNBC, he was National Security Advisor. And he was an advisor. And Washington, the establishment loved him. But I can't think of any presidential advisor who's gotten anywhere near the attention Bannon has gotten. And what is that attention? Virtually all of it that you find in the drive-by media is rooted around the fact the guy's got to go. He's got to go. And every news story is oriented around that premise, that he's got to go and that we in the media, we're going to force it. We're going to get rid of the guy. It was no accident that he got a Time magazine cover in the third week of Trump's presidency, referring to him as the real president behind the scenes. That was done because all these people think that Trump has the shallowest ego ever. And they think you can really manipulate Trump by simply playing nice or mean with his ego. Saturday Night Live, as our previous caller made mention of the fact that they're treating Bannon as the real president. Bannon shows up at CPAC with Reince Priebus. Says we're going to dismantle the administrative state. They had a cow in the drive-by media and in the Washington. You can't do that. You can't, because dismantling the administrative state is another way of saying you're going to drain the swamp. And so all of the focus in the media is on Bannon. And it first started out how dangerous he is, how he's got Trump's ear, how Trump's really doesn't have a mind of his own, but Bannon does, and Bannon's the guy steering Trump, and this is not good, that Bannon is the alt-right white supremacist nationalist, that Bannon is the guy that doesn't want the U.S. to even be in the world, and if he could put the country on a different planet, he would. It's Bannon that's trying to poison Trump's mind. It's Bannon that hates Jared Kushner. Bannon hates Ivanka Trump. Bannon hates everybody. Bannon's a pig. Trump's a pig. Together they're piggish, and it's dangerous, so we got to get rid of Bannon. If we get rid of Bannon, then Trump can somehow be saved to be a nice guy. And it continues. And so Michael Goodwin was at the White House the other day and scored an interview. He's in the New York Post. He's an opinion columnist, and he had an interview with Trump. And I'm going to paraphrase what he quoted Trump as saying. You got to remember. You got to remember, Bannon didn't come on my campaign till after I'd beaten everybody. I'd beaten all the governors. I'd beaten all the senators. He came in late. I didn't even know him. He came in late. I like him, but I am my own strategist. I don't need a strategist. Everybody read this. Bannon's on the way out. All right. It's only a minute. Bannon's on the way out. I've never seen people, the way they want to get rid of Bannon, they usually reserve for the way they want to get rid of presidents they don't like Nixon or Reagan. But they want to get rid of this guy, Bannon, like nothing I've ever seen. And the stories on this rival in intensity this made-up story on collusion between Trump and Russia. Now, they can't put Bannon in that story, so they got Carter Page for that. But, man, now, just today, we have the Washington Post inside Bannon's struggle from shadow president to Trump's marked man. You know what this is like? You remember, folks, you may not remember this. Some of you will. During the days of the old Soviet Union, and when Mao Zedong was alive, let's stick with the Soviet Union. Every May Day, the Soviet Politburo leadership would go stand outside in front of the Kremlin and watch the military and mortars and rockets and so forth parade by in a show of strength. And Kremlin watchers always paid attention to who was standing nearest the premier of the day. If it was Brezhnev, who's standing to his left, who's standing to his right. If it's Yuri Andropov, same thing. If it's Gorbachev. And in that sense, we try, okay, who's in and who's out? Because communist countries never tell you. I mean, when their leaders die, they don't tell you. They even, when Mao Zedong died, they faked that for 2 years. They even photoshopped pictures of him swimming in the Yangtze River with his head bobbing up like a bobblehead. They tried to tell us he was actually swimming at age 85 or 90, whatever it was. And he'd been room temperature for many years. So trying to get us an idea of who is got the Soviet premier's ear. Well, doing the same thing with Bannon. Is Bannon at the NSC? I thought he just got kicked out of the NSC. What's he doing? Did you see he was at the NSC meeting in Mar-a-Lago? But how could that happen? Because he was kicked out of it, they thought. But yet there he was. So every day they're studying Bannon. They're studying where he shows up with Priebus. Do he and Priebus still have a rivalry going? Is Bannon still trying to get rid of Priebus? Is Priebus still trying to get rid of Bannon? Does Bannon hate Kushner? Is Kushner trying to get Bannon? Do they hate each other? Is Bannon really overstepping so bad that Ivanka has had to join up with Kushner to get rid of him, and they're angling with their own dad to get rid of him? This is daily, this kind of stuff. And so the picture that has been presented, and what everybody's living off of today, is you have Trump over here who one day loved Bannon because he was just like Trump. He was a white supremacist. He was a nationalist. He was a populist. It's America first. And that's when they had to get rid of Bannon. And then the stories came that there are a lot of people inside the Trump White House don't like Bannon. He's uncouth. He's a pig. He's got too much influence. He's dangerous. So then we got stories. Jared Kushner, 36-year-old son-in-law, because he's married to Ivanka, is now in a knockdown drag-out with Bannon, and he's going to win because Jared's family. And that's what this all means. The quotes to Michael Goodwin about Bannon not being all that valuable, not being needed as a strategist. I didn't know Bannon all that long. I frankly can't even remember why I picked him, that kind of stuff. And over here you have Jared Kushner as a quasi-shadow Secretary of State. You know, Tillerson goes to Moscow, but Jared's in the Middle East. And all this palace intrigue. But there's some people never mentioned in the same way Bannon is mentioned. And those people, we've talked about him here. Gary Cohn, who is the leader of the Democrats in the Trump White House. His aide is somebody named Dina Powell. And Jared Kushner is put in that group, and that they're all aligned against Bannon. But there are other people here that we never hear about in these battles inside the White House. We never hear the name H.R. McMaster. We don't hear any of the names of the prominent people of the National Security Council. It's all Bannon, and it's all Jared. And it's all oriented. I'm telling you what, the media is thinking that they can force Bannon out by playing to Trump's ego. And they think this New York Post interview that Trump gave to Michael Goodwin is proof positive that they are succeeding. But I don't think the Bannon-Kushner battle is the battle that's actually worth paying attention in there. I go back to this Washington Post story that's easily over a month old now. And the Washington Post story had Bannon and Stephen Miller and a number of Trump loyalists in an ongoing battle with the so-called Democrats that Trump had picked to be in the inner circle, Gary Cohn, Dina Powell. And so I looked into that. I actually checked into it, and I found out that the Washington Post story was actually true. That battle was going on. And Jared Kushner, he was in it, but not prominently. So this was, I mean, he's always been positioned as anti-Bannon. But I don't think that's really what's happening now. I think all of this is missing it. I think all of it is a bit of a smokescreen. Because even, the Washington Post has their story, inside Bannon's struggle for shadow president, from shadow president to Trump's marked man. New York Times, Trump undercuts Bannon, whose job may be in danger. AP, is Bannon in peril? Trump comments worry his populist base. In every one of these stories, there's no evidence. Honest to God, the New York Times, all of this is reported, but it's from anonymous sources who do not provide any evidence. It's just that the media is choosing to believe the anonymous sources. One person with firsthand knowledge of internal White House dynamics, who asked not to be identified, insisted that no immediate changes were likely. Well, then why are you doing these stories? If no immediate changes are likely, why in the world, what's the hubbub here? Goes back to, if there's no evidence of Trump colluding with Russia, then what the heck are all these stories about? Well, they're trying to make news and create news here. But I think it's quite telling, folks, that we don't have any stories involving intrigue about Gary Cohn. And we don't have any stories involving intrigue about H.R. McMaster. I mean, these people are in Trump's inner circle as well. The same with Dina Powell. The stories are universally about Bannon and how he's got to go and how he's the problem and how he's got the presence here. And this guy is so off the mainstream. He's the white nationalist. He's the populist. He's got Trump's ear and he's poison and he's dangerous. And if the truth be known, what Bannon is probably doing is trying to prevent establishment types from succeeding in co-opting and influencing Trump totally. That would be my guess. That's what I think the real battle going on in there is. The fact that it's only Bannon mentioned and it's always Bannon that has to go and Bannon the problem. What? It's just too pat. And it's just too predictable. The media always focuses on the people they consider the threats. Remember my old adage, the Democrats will always tell us who they fear by trying to take them out. The media is the Democrats, and it'll always tell us who they fear. And believe me, they don't want to get rid of Bannon because it's going to help Trump. They don't want to force Bannon out of there because it's going to make Trump a better president. That's not what they're about. With these people, it is all political. It is all ideological. A brief timeout. We'll come back. I promise we'll get back to your calls next.